So now let's study how the change of the required reserve ratio may affect the federal funds rate. And the required reserve ratio is one of the monetary tools used by the Federal Reserve. So here we actually can raise two different questions. Question 1, if required reserve ratio, so in this case I use RRR to stand for the required reserve ratio. If required reserve ratio increase, what happened to the federal funds rate? So again, we have to use the model we learned to study this. Federal funds rate and the reserve, demand for the reserve, and the supply of the reserve. So using this, we can find out the initial equilibrium point for the federal funds rate and the equilibrium point for the reserve. So if the Federal Reserve raise required reserve ratios, every commercial bank have to hold more reserve. And we know the commercial bank represent the demand side of the federal funds market. If every bank need to hold more reserve, the demand will increase. So demand increase means the demand curve will shift to the right. But remember, the interest rate paid on the reserve balance, IDB, there's no any change, so the floor of the demand curve remain the same. The only shift is this part. So when the demand curve shifts to the right, and we can find out the new equilibrium point. IFF1. So we now can make conclusion. If the Federal Reserve raises the required reserve ratio, it actually will push up the federal funds rate. The second question is, if the Federal Reserve want to keep the federal funds rate at the same level after question 1, keep IFF as the initial level, IFF 0. So what happened? So we can actually quickly show the change of the question number 1. Demand curve, supply curve, equilibrium interest rate, reserve. Okay, and we know in the first case, after Federal Reserve raised required reserve ratio, the demand curve shift to the right, so interest rate will increase to IFF1. But now, because the Federal Reserve want to keep the federal funds rate at the same level as IFF0, so which means Federal Reserve need to reduce the federal funds rate from IFF1. So how can the Federal Reserve reach this goal? And the one thing they can do is they actually can increase their reserves, supply of the reserve. So how to increase the supply of the reserve? We know if the Fed buy securities in the open market, it will shift the supply curve to the right. So after supply curve shift to the right, it will intercept with a new demand curve at a point here. So this point here indicate the federal funds rate will remain at the same level. So in order to counter the increase of the federal funds rate resulting from increase in the required reserve ratio, the Federal Reserve can take action to buy securities in the open market, push the supply curve to the right, and then reduce the federal funds rate back to the initial level.